everyone. Welcome back to the Holistic Pharmacy Podcast. I have a very special guest with me today. It's Dr. Matmon Harrell, and he is the Mindful PharmD. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on, Marina. It's nice to speak with you again and kind of catch up and stuff. So thank you for having me.
Yes, I was featured on your podcast a short while ago. So thank you. And for listeners, we'll put that in the show notes for everyone to check out and give a shout out to me on Dr. Matmon's podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed doing that with you and collaborating with you on that podcast. It was probably one of my most popular ones so far, about 5 episodes out. But yeah, I enjoyed having you. Just the information you brought and everything was very fresh, and your perspective on things I appreciate very much.
Well, I appreciate hearing the compliments. So thank you again for having me. And on my show, I'd love for us to dive deeper into you and your story and your background and how you came to be the Mindful PharmD. So I can't wait to hear about, first of all, how you got started, where you grew up, how you went to pharmacy school, why was this the direction that you chose?
Yeah, wow. So I grew up in Florida, South Florida to be exact, and my household was a busy one. I think I shared with you previously that my mom was a single parent, and she raised 5 of us alone, and so a lot of days it was her out working, making sure that we had food on the table, and really my brother and my older brother and I were really running the house, so to speak. And it was, as you can imagine, when you have a bunch of adolescent children, running the household, it was a little hectic at times, but it was fun. And I remember just jumping ahead a little, but I'll come back. But I remember when I was in college, and I met my wife, I would tell her, I want a household I want about 5 kids. I wanted a big family. Obviously that changed very quickly after we had our first boy. Life with kids can be, as you know, can be stressful sometimes, but still a joy and fun. But, in my household, we were, like I said, always going, always busy, trying to make sure we didn't kill each other. And my interest in pharmacy started when I was in high school. And obviously, when you're in high school, nobody really knows exactly what they want to do or be. But I enjoyed, for me, the biology. Two of my favorite courses were biology and chemistry. And before I actually applied to pharmacy school, I'd looked at attending the University of Central Florida, UCF, to major in chemistry. And at the time, too, there was sort of this, my mom was actually a pharmacy technician, and she would come home and talk to me all the time about working in that time, retail pharmacy. And it sounded interesting. Again, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do or what I wanted to become. And, she would push pharmacy, for me. And really it came from a perspective of trying to make sure that I was financially secure. I tell everybody all the time, it's not everybody has is afforded the opportunity to pursue a passion. And that was me. I couldn't really afford to pursue a passion. And then again, at that time period in my life, didn't really know what my passion was.
Right.
And I'll get to that maybe a little bit later in the interview, but kind of share with you how I came to pursue my passion. But at that time, it was, pursue something that is going to be financially stable for you and your future family. And so that's what I did. My mom made pharmacy seem very, very appealing. And so I applied to Florida A&M University, College of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences, and I was accepted. And the rest is history. And so here I am now. I graduated in 2011, 10 years later. And I've been practicing. I've had experience across the field, retail, managed care, pharmacy. And now I'm at this place where I want to dive more into mental health and figuring out how I can bridge, and marry my 2 passions now, my 2 fields, because I've developed this passion for pharmacy. And I love the profession of pharmacy, absolutely. And then I've also sort of realized that my main passion and goal is to focus on mental health. And so that's kind of where I am right now, and with regard to being the mindful PharmD, as I call myself.
Yeah, I'd love to dive deeper into where that name and tagline came from for you. But also, I just want to comment on how you grew up in a family of five, and then you wanted a family of five of your own for five kids. And I would love to know also what your siblings ended up doing in terms of career, and like how you all divided and conquered, like, what would be a savvy profession for each of you.
Yeah, man. So I'm a first of my family to really graduate from higher education, with first of all, obviously with my doctorate degree, but my siblings, they really pursued different paths, if you will. Two of my sisters pursued a degree in dental, to become a dental hygienist, and they were out in California, and the field is, don't know if you're familiar with California, but the field is very competitive out there. And so they ended up changing their minds, and went a different route. One of my sisters is and was really passionate about acting, and she pursued a degree, not a degree rather, but a pathway toward acting. Didn't pan out, as sometimes life throws curveballs our way. And so she actually came back over on the East Coast, and now she's in the same city as my mom in Georgia, and she's got a family down there, and she's working on herself, and trying to improve her situation. But for the most part, she's still passionate about acting. Sometimes I make fun of her because she has all of these different personalities, and she recorded a movie one time, a very low budget film, but I've watched it, and I've always come back to her and tell her, you've got an art for this. After you get settled in over here on the East Coast, you should really. I know Atlanta is a really good area for actors. It's sort of the East Coast answer to Hollywood.
Yeah,
And
I was just gonna say it's like an up and coming Hollywood.
Seriously, and so all the movies we see now, it says filmed in Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia. So I told her, you should really pursue that. And then one of my other sisters is an author. She's written a few books, and again, more in the realm of romantic novels and those kind of things. I actually own a few of them. Haven't had a chance to read them because I'm focused on nonfiction right now. But she has a gift and a talent in that as well. My older brother, he really just works odd jobs, sort of an entrepreneur himself. With skills in construction, skills in you're really just being a handyman. And then I do have my younger sister. She and I were one of the closest ones growing up. She's still out west right now with her husband, who's in the military. And they have a 3-year-old daughter, beautiful 3-year-old daughter, and one on the way, another daughter on the way. I feel sorry for them. They've got 2 girls. Nothing against women, but I always say, man, I probably couldn't have 2 girls or a daughter, just because I would go crazy. I know what it's like to live in a household full of younger sisters, and so they drove me crazy at times. But what's that?
You need a lot of bathrooms to get.
Yes, a lot of bathrooms, a lot of patience. But but yeah, she's pursuing a degree in healthcare management, so similar to our field. And so I've been kind of coaching her and talking with her on what she plans to do, and saying, hey, you can work for a hospital, you can start a consultant business. There's so much you can do with the degree she's pursuing, and so I stay connected with her. But yeah, that's sort of my siblings. They're all over the place, as you could tell.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, so as you can see, even though you're all from the same family, you had the kind of foresight, or like the stance that you need to be practical and get yourself a stable position, and healthcare is always like a good field to be in. But then not everybody, even growing up in the same household, had the same ideas, and some people just went for their passions and are just going in there and it's like it doesn't matter. It's so individual. Like even though we're brought up with the same kind of environment and surroundings, and still we're each so different in what we choose to pursue.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's very possible to have and to grow up in the same environment, but have different experiences.
Yeah.
I'm mindful of that as I raise my own boys. My youngest son, even though my wife and I, for the most part have the same values, we can tell that, again, the environment is different. We live in a different city. We have one relative living with us right now, and that wasn't the case with my older son. And so, as I'm studying my second passion, which I'll talk about, marriage and family therapy, I'm understanding and realizing that it's, again, to your point, it's very possible to live in the same household, have very different experiences, and then take those experiences into your life when you get older, and really dive into and become your individual person, with your strengths and your weaknesses, and then share those strengths and those weaknesses down the line. So, but yeah, very, very possible and very true to do that. So
Yeah, we all come here with like individual likes and dislikes and personalities, which can be molded to an extent, but then there's like that core
yeah.
that genetics that can be activated by your epigenetics, and
Yep.
even if the environment is the same, like we keep saying, it still like allows you for some choices and some leeway into how you integrate the experiences, and using things like personal development and mindset and mindfulness tools
Yeah.
to really hone in and take those qualities that you possess and use them to get different results and outcomes.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So talk to us about these 10 years of pharmacy practice, like you said, in different settings. And you said that you moved. So where are you living now? What are you practicing now? How have you integrated those different settings and experiences to what you're doing now?
Yeah, I moved from Florida, and first of all, I got started in Florida, and in 2011, and I worked as a retail pharmacy manager for about 2 years. And then I moved to Raleigh, North Carolina area, and continued my role there. But then after about a year and a half or so, I transitioned out of retail into more of managed care space. And I was doing, prior authorization reviews. And after about 6 months, I got promoted to be the deputy director of the contract that the company I was working for, that they had for North Carolina Medicaid. And that was the best time that I had really in my career, because I was creating clinical policy for North Carolina Medicaid beneficiaries. I was, interacting with folks in ways, mediative ways. For example, whenever somebody on my team would deny a prior authorization or make an adverse decision, I would be the one on the other end talking with providers saying, hey, here's sort of where the clinical criteria stands with the state. And, here's how we can get the patient something that is clinically beneficial, but is also financially advantageous or financially responsible for the state of North Carolina. And having those conversations and interacting with patients, interacting with providers, and then also interacting with mediators, I got to meet so many different people and hear their stories about, patients with chronic pain, for example, and why this specific medication is working for them. And sometimes when we're in clinical practice, we have all this knowledge about how, what clinical regimen to use and how to work through clinical guidelines. But at the end of the day, there's a patient on the other end of those clinical guidelines. And thankfully, I believe the healthcare field is moving more in such a way to where we can say, well, yes, take the clinical guidelines, but also use the patient as a guide. And, what works for one patient is not going to work for another patient, even if it's been studied, even if it's been, all of the T's have been crossed and the I's have been dotted in these clinical studies. At the end of the day, there's a patient. And so that space gave me more of an appreciation for an individual's personal story. And a lot of times I found myself relating to the patient and saying, okay, yeah, I hear you. This medication has worked for you well over the past 5 years, 10 years. Let's not disrupt therapy. Let's keep this on board. And so I really enjoyed that work. And what took me away from that was a personal calling. Right now, my wife and I serve as associate pastors for our church. And so here's that spiritual element and spiritual values that we have in our life. And I took this position as the associate pastor at my local church here. And because of doing that, there wasn't an opportunity in the professional space to continue doing that work. And so I took a step back for now, back into retail. And I'm working towards some different things. I'm networking with different people like you and others, who are, more along the lines of functional medicine, which is an interesting field to me. And so from North Carolina, we moved to South Carolina. This is where we are right now. We're in South Carolina. We bought a house last year in the midst of COVID. I told my aunt, she's a realtor. She said, you bought a house? I said, yeah, I bought a house. And but anyway, here we are, and we're enjoying life, we're loving life, and really just making those strides to step into my next passion, which is marriage and family therapy. And is it okay if I kind of talk about that?
Of course.
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah, and so again, just pointing back to my experience in Raleigh, and when I met those different people and hearing those personal stories. There was a defining moment for me in 2019. We had made the decision to move to South Carolina, again pursuing that spiritual calling. And I remember standing in my chiropractor's office, and there was a story that had just been released about a mother. She was the wife of a pastor who had pulled over on the side of the road. And she, with her 4 kids in the car, varying in ages. There was a 3-year-old, I think, all the way up to about 12 years old. And she got out of her vehicle and jumped off of a bridge. And even now, as I'm telling you this story, there's sort of this emotional response that I'm having, because I remember standing in the chiropractor's office and talking to my chiropractor. He probably thought I was insane, but as I'm telling him this story about moving and taking my family to an unknown place, to pursue not only a spiritual calling, but to also hopefully put my life in a better state to pursue my second passion. I'm weeping in front of him as I'm telling him this story. And that moment, I said to myself, yes, I realize that I have some issues that I have to address in my own personal life. In terms of confidence, in terms of, am I making the right decision? But the story of this individual whom I don't know, this woman who committed suicide, I didn't know her at all, but her story made me realize there are people in this life, people in this world who don't have, or maybe they lose sight of those resilient factors that help them to overcome. Because at the end of the day, life can be challenging, life can be hard. And sometimes we lose out on those factors, those sources of resilience that help us overcome. And so, for her story was sort of the launching pad for me to connect with other people and say, hey, there's a better way, hopefully, than the way that you're thinking about going. There's a better way to get your life back, not just in the mental area, but just for your audience in the nutritional area. A lot of times we lose sight and begin to decline in our mental health because our nutrition isn't right. Our nutrition is not where it needs to be. And so taking that story with me on this journey, I'm pursuing marriage and family therapy to hopefully connect with people and help just one family at a time. I always say, in my church even, and the people that I meet, I always say, you have the ability to change the world, but it doesn't have to be the whole world. It could just be your world. Change your circle of influence, the people that you touch each and every day. You have a personal story that you can share with them that could be an enlightenment for them. It could be a strength for them. It could be a way for them. It could mean the difference between them waking up in the morning just by you saying, hey, I'm thinking about you. Just by you saying, hey, you know, there's a different way to go. There's a stronger way. You can find strength in me. And so that really is my drive each and every day, is to connect with different people and help them along their path, to better health. Health for me, I'm a pharmacist. Better health to me is not just taking a pill. You know, it's not just exercising. It's not just having good relationships. It's sometimes it's all of those things. It's multifactorial. And what drew me towards marriage and family therapy specifically, because, you know, I could have done counseling, I could have done, you know, clinical psychology, but what drew me to the field of marriage and family therapy is the systemic nature that they have. Marriage and family therapists think in a broad sense. You know, I think of, for example, a machine. You know, a machine's going to have cogs, a machine's going to have nuts and bolts, a machine's going to have lubricant, all of these different things that help it function together. But at the end of the day, it's still one. It's one machine, but it can't operate if one piece is missing, or if one piece is taken out, or one piece begins to lose its function. And so for marriage and family therapy, it was an attractive field to me because it looks at the whole life of the person. And there are different models within the profession as a whole. But it looks at the whole life of the individual, and it tries to bring out those strengths and then call to mind those areas that maybe the individual is weak in, and then use a psychological approach to help this individual change, or to help the individual improve their relationships. So that's where I am here in South Carolina. I'm pursuing that degree in marriage and family therapy.
Wow.
So,
wow.
That's a lot. Wow. I know.
Yeah, a lot there that I want to kind of go back to. Well, first of all, I totally agree that as pharmacists, we sometimes just think about the physical body and correcting, you know, a deficiency of something, or like a mechanical, you know, almost like a mechanical thing that has gone awry, and you try to fix the biological, physiological aspect of a certain system in the body. And we do also like dive deep into the molecular level of things and how things should be functioning. But often, you know, even the WHO, I keep mentioning this too, the definition of health by the World Health Organization is defined as the spiritual, mental, and physical. All three of those things have to be assessed to define someone as truly holistically being healthy. Right. And sometimes, you know, the Western allopathic model just divides all of those into three separate areas, and we have specialists that really focus on each area separately, but we have to realize that each of those informs the other. So if one of those things is awry, it's going to affect the other two things, and vice versa. And like, you know, if you have your mental health influencing what's going on physiologically in your body, you have your physiology and your nutrition influencing your mental health. And then if your spirituality is not there, your relationships are not there, then there's almost like no point to even exist. Right. You know, the whole point is to be in relationship with other beings, like your family or other relationships. You know, each business is almost like a relationship, providing a service to each person. And also the whole entrepreneurial journey has made me realize that until your personal development side is strong, you know, if you're on your game and you're, like you were saying, confident in yourself and your skills and what you have to offer, you're not going to have a successful business. You know, right. Until you get that personal development side really down pat, you cannot function as a, you know, a successful person and a successful business.
Yeah. You've got to know yourself. Absolutely. You've got to know, I always say you've got to know who you are and where you are physically and where you are mentally, you know, because every season in life, and that's exactly what it is. It's a season. Like we go through these seasons where I just came out of one, if I could be totally transparent, where I I just on any given day just felt like, there's a certain aspect of, again, am I confident enough? Can I actually do what I'm pursuing? Why am I back in school? Like, what is going on? Like, I spent 6 years in pharmacy school, got my doctorate, and I thought, man, I'll never go to school again. And I hate that I thought that, because if I had the sort of the mindset of, keep learning, there's a part of me that's always interested in learning, but up until the last 2 or 3 years, I haven't really acted on it. And so now I'm at this point in my life where it's like, okay, 6 years have gone by, 7 years have gone by. I love my profession, but there's more that I can be learning. There's more that I can be doing. Counting and standing up all day on your feet is not the only way. This isn't the only avenue of pharmacy. So, there's that hunger that comes from, or that hunger rather, that leads to curiosity. And so, but you have to know who you are and where you are in order to help somebody else. Because if you don't know who you are, then you can't really help somebody else figure out who they are and help them along their path. And if you don't know where you are in your mental state, don't know what season of life you're in, then it's going to be for me, it's going to be a little challenging to make those next steps and to take those next steps. And so know who you are, know where you are, so that you can then make and build upon the connections that you are making. And, I have to be honest with you. For me, I met you on LinkedIn. And I think that first of all, the reason I pursued, really a connection with LinkedIn, or creating a LinkedIn account, because where I was going was, for the longest time, I didn't have a social media account. And to this day, I still don't have some social media accounts because of who I am. I started by saying you got to know who you are and where you are. Who I am is this individual who is sensitive to the needs of others. And so a lot of times, social media for me can be a breeding ground for comparison. And comparison is a very strong contaminator for personal growth. It can contaminate your personal growth. It can contaminate your confidence. It can contaminate your drive. It's just, it can very well be a contaminator. And so for the longest time, I avoided social media accounts. But so that's the who I am. And then where I am mentally, I got to this space where it's like, okay, I need to make some stronger connections, some different connections, so that I can put myself in a different part of my field, in a different mindset of what it means to be a pharmacist. Okay. Because again, this is the passion. This is the profession that I love. So I opened up this LinkedIn account, and first thing I did was come across Alex. Alex over at the Happy PharmD. Yes, Alex Barker, and the work that he's doing. And Alex, if you're watching this, I don't know if you are, kudos to you, man. I appreciate your work, and I hope that he continues, helping pharmacists realize that there's more out there than what we've been told with regard to what it means to be a pharmacist. And so, yes, you can be a pharmacist and pursue a degree, a master's in marriage and family therapy. You can be a pharmacist and develop a practice and a business around nutrition. You can be a pharmacist and do all of these different other things and be an entrepreneur and, own your own lawn company. Like you can do these things. And so who you are, knowing who you are and knowing where you are is where it begins. And so that this is this journey that I'm on, as I call myself the Mindful PharmD, being mindful of who I am, being mindful of where I am, so that I can then reach out and help somebody else discover and develop who they are and where they are. So.
Yeah, I love that. And you're right. We are cyclical beings, just like everything else in nature. We're part of nature. So it shouldn't be a surprise to us that there are seasons for everything, night and day, winter, summer. Everything has its own biological rhythm, how we are born and then we age and then we are not here anymore, but it's just a part of life. And thinking and labeling and comparing something as good or bad is pretty much a human construct. So just because something is not, as pleasant and bright as something else doesn't mean it's not a necessary phase in our development. So we need the dark, hibernating winters and nights in order to develop, our strong seeds that can go on and become beautiful leaves and flowers and bear fruit and things like that. So just like the plants have their cycles, we have our cycles, and we have our dark nights of the soul. And, we have things that show us that things are not always going to be how we expect them to be. I think that's like when we get really upset, when some reality doesn't match our expectations of reality.
Yep.
So it's like this realization that we just need to be open, because we're not God, we're not in control of everything. So we are just here to observe and be aware, and then be aware that even when we are faced with a choice, that's another thing that can make us feel upset, when we feel like we actually don't have a choice, like we're forced to make a choice that we don't want to make. But we always should realize that there is another way out. It's not always choice A or B. Sometimes there's a lucrative choice that you are not thinking about, that you can get help from somebody else to give you another perspective on things.
Absolutely.
So, mental health is huge with that. So, the story that you told in the beginning of the show about the woman who made that choice, she must have not seen that there was any other choice. This was the only thing that she saw that was available to her. So I think, the bad stuff that happens to us is really humbling, because if nothing ever bad happens, there would be no need for progress. There would be no need to improve yourself, and
right.
You would just be super arrogant, and nothing would faze you. But all of these things are here because we're here to learn. We're here to experience the spectrum of things. And unfortunately, there's a lot of bad stuff and unfair stuff that happens to people, but we always have a choice of what to do next.
Absolutely. And that, that choice, I just did an episode on talking about recovery capital. I don't know if you're familiar with this concept, but it really does sound like resilience. And I'll tell you, everybody knows what resilience is, right?
Yes.
But I kind of
about that.
That's right.
That's right. Taught us collectively about resilience.
Yes. And, there's back in the 90s, there was this duo, William Granfield and Robert Cloud, and they developed this concept of recovery capital with regard to treating addicts who were now that in itself is a message by itself, because we are so addicted to life. We're addicted to the next thing. We're addicted to success. More and more is coming out and being talked about this faux reality between a work-life balance, and that there really is no balance these days. It's all work. It's all work. Very seldom do we get a chance to sit down and have conversations like you and I are having today, and just enjoy each other's company, for an hour, 30 minutes, and talk about things that are important to us. But William Granfield and Robert Cloud, they developed this concept called recovery capital. And what they saw was that people who were addicted to substances, whether it be alcohol or prescription drugs or illegal substances, they had sort of, at the time, 3 domains that they worked through in order to overcome addiction without the need of pharmacological intervention.
Wow. Okay?
What they found was the first domain was human capital. And they talked about the innate strengths within us. So within Marina, within Matmon, the innate strength within each of us individually that gives us sort of this drive to pursue or to overcome what's harming our lives and what's destroying our relationships. So the innate strength, the innate skills, because a lot of times within the realm of addiction, it's not a matter of of will. The person has the will, but a lot of times they don't have the skill to overcome. They don't know how to or what steps to make. So the human capital sort of addresses those things. And, you know, when you think systemically, you have to say, okay, well, from a young age, what's feeding that human capital? What's funding that capital? What's going into the reserve individual to give them strength? So that's the human capital domain. The connected capital domain is the social capital domain. And the social capital domain is your relationships. How strong are they? Not the quantity. You know, you might have 50 friends, but
Right.
what's the quality of those relationships? Can you trust this person with your deepest, darkest secrets? Can you trust this person to carry your emotions through tough times?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the community capital. So not just your own personal friends, but then also the community in which you live in. You know, I grew up in, I didn't mention this earlier, but I grew up in, you know, really in poverty. My mom was a single parent raising 5 kids. Sometimes she had 2 jobs, sometimes she had 3 jobs. And so in the community we grew up in, you know, a lot of times the kids were left to their own devices because parents were out, you know, working. I grew up in the projects. And so my community, you know, while there were certain aspects of it that you know made me who I am today in terms of, again, my strength and my drive, and there are other aspects of it that you know that I have to address in private counseling sessions, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's just a reality of my makeup and who I am. And so that's the community. And then one of the domain was the financial capital, which is to go on a vacation, right? To kind of build up your recovery, build up your ability to be resilient and to overcome a you know, stressful situation. If all you're doing each and every day is working, you know, to survive, because your financial capital depends on it, then it's one less factor in the element of, or in the realm of resilience, right? So William Granville, Robert Cloud, they came up with these domains. We're talking about recovery capital. And as I'm studying this here recently, I saw the connection between resilience. Yes, they were talking about addiction and addiction to substances, but there's also this, as I started out by saying, there's also this, again, the fact that we're addicted to life. Sometimes we need to have a strong resilience fund, you know, recovery capital, resilience fund, same thing, a strong resilience fund that gives us the strength to overcome in tough seasons of our life.
Mm.
And, you know, I ask you, I ask your listeners, I ask my listeners, what is it? What's fueling your resilience right now? Because life is cyclical, because life is seasonal, you know, summer, winter, fall, just around the corner. You might be in summer right now, but just around the corner might be a winter where you feel, you know, personally unsuccessful. You feel drained because you know, you haven't had those seasons of rest. You just, you know, just going all year long. You have to understand that you're depleting your resilience. You're depleting your fund. And so you have to go through those seasons of winter in order to stop, to rest, let the ground, you know, if we're talking agriculture, let the ground rest, right? Stop digging up the fruit, stop digging up the harvest, and let it rest. And so we have to do the same thing in our own lives if we're gonna, you know, be resilient and overcome and have a different experience. So,
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing.
yeah.
I agree. I think we often forget about those cycles and the seasons, and we just try, because of like the constructs of our society and capitalism and all of that, we just try to fit in with what everybody else is doing. And especially in like huge metropolitan cities, and when we see like these go-getters all around us and A-type personalities, it's difficult not to get sucked in and perceive that as normal. But when you take a larger look at the big picture of who we are, once again, and what brings us health and joy and personal success, and what success really means for us. And it's not usually being super depleted and having money in the bank doesn't really, to me, spell out the picture of success. The picture of success to me is like somebody who controls their time and actually has time to schedule in joyful activities, or can rest when they need to rest. And unfortunately, our society just doesn't really value rest, even though proper rest can actually make for more of a successful, project completion.
It does. Yeah.
All of that. So it's like we really have this idea of like working per hour, rather than working per the fruition of a project, and then getting some rest between the next project, because that would be the cyclical way to go about it. So we really need to figure out on a personal level what that is for us, what is a balance, work-life balance or otherwise, what that is for us, and how can we achieve that in our own world, like you were saying. And then, the rest of the world hopefully will fall into place if each of us is making those individual choices.
Absolutely. You mentioned something that, about what success was to you, and I just kind of want to revisit that real quick. For me, I agree with you. And success for me is having successors. Like if you have people coming after you who you're walking with, whether it's your children, whether it's your colleagues, an intern, at your website, people that you're pouring into. At my church, I always tell the ministers that I work with and the other leaders in my church, I always tell them, as I'm developing them, one question I always ask them is, who are you walking with right now? You might be walking with God, but who are you walking with in the physical sense on this earth? Holding hands with them and taking them on this journey, walking with them on their journey, and really pouring into, because that to me is a true mark of success, because we can't take, if we can't take any of this with us.
No.
Right? We have a finite life. We have 75, 85, maybe some 95 years or so. And we can't take any of this physical stuff with us, and so, but what we can remember and recall are those relationships that we had. We can remember and recall the people that we, and the lives and that, that we poured into. So as I'm creating a quote legacy, one of the things that I'm very mindful of is the relationships that I'm connecting with and the people that I'm connecting with. That's why I sort of had to change my mindset on what I thought about social media. And that's why I'm here today, because 5 years ago, Marina, I probably never would have made it, because again, I didn't have that mindset on how, sites like, LinkedIn or, even Facebook to some degree, can be beneficial. There's sort of a double-edged sword. I wrote a paper some time ago about, how social media it's just that it's a double-edged sword. It can help us develop and create relationships, and hopefully lasting, real relationships. But then there's the dark side of it, to where again there's that comparison that comes into play. I think some years ago Facebook had over 1 billion open accounts, but I think 85% of them, 80 to 85% of them were fake accounts. And and when I read that, I'm like, oh my gosh, so then who am I talking to?
Yeah.
But this is the real, right? This is reality, what we're doing right now, having this dialogue and having these conversations, not just trolling each other's sites and stuff, memes and one aspect of our lives, but developing those relationships along the way. That to me is true success. I may not have $1 million in the bank, but if I have 4 or 5 good friends, 4 or 5 people that I can say, yeah, we connected, man. We're people of like-minded faith, and I believe I've done some good, in this world. So that's my outlook.
Totally. I love that idea of legacy. That's the spot on word. And, I think at the bottom of our hearts, and this existential desire in us is ultimately to have had meaning in our life. And how do you measure that is if you affect positive change or in somebody else. Usually, how do you affect positive change in someone else? That means you did a good service, that means your life was meaningful to someone. So whether it's literally your biological family or like a colleague or an intern or somebody on social media that is looking up to you, that we don't know how many other sparks we're igniting just by being here and sharing our messages. But the reason why we are here is to hopefully be doing just that.
Yeah. Somebody can be hopefully inspired is such a cliche word, but that's what it calls to mind. Is just, again, looking at our individual but close-knit stories. And you shared your story on my podcast and how they align and how we look just beyond the synthetic when it comes to health. It's not just about popping a pill, but it's a holistic, right? It's a holistic approach. And so maybe somebody hearing this can go, I was headed down this straight, narrow path. I had a narrow-minded view of what it meant to be a pharmacist. I had a narrow-minded view of what it meant to be a provider of care. But those two, they really did something to change my mind. And the other guests too that you've had on have really done something to change my mind and to give me a different outlook. And you know what? Now I'm going to go this way. I'm going to go, take route B. You mentioned earlier, I'm going to go take route B and really see where that leads me. And maybe along the way, I'll meet some different people and they'll help me take a different route, and so. But that's what it's all about, man. Just living life together. We are not made to be in this life alone.
Right.
You sort of mentioned that briefly on when we talked on my podcast. We are relational beings. The fact that we're here. Say we talked about legacy. We can live somebody's legacy in the positive and in the negative. If we're not careful, and so when we're developing ourselves and making those relationships with other people, we just have to remember that and come back to the fact that we are relational beings, and doing life with other people is more fun than doing life alone. And that is just the truth of it. And not just people, but also, the rest of God's creation, talking about animals, talking about plants and how we harvest those and consume those. And, we're all of us, physically are in this thing together and living this life, hopefully to the fullest, and can learn from each other. So.
Yeah. One of my coaches says that, if somebody is raising their hand in class, right, the first person to raise their hand is giving permission to everyone else to also volunteer. Like nobody wants to be the first one to be different, right? But then if somebody does take route B, then everybody else suddenly knows that it's possible. Or just like when world records are broken, often it's like all of a sudden when one person breaks a record, it's like a limiting belief was broken in everyone. And now all of a sudden other people are breaking it. This happened like in running. This happens in scientific discoveries. Like people across the globe are working on something and all of a sudden it's like collective consciousness and like it's made in multiple places and once, something that has never been done before is all of a sudden possible everywhere.
Yeah.
So just because we don't know that something is real doesn't mean that it isn't. It's just that our mindset is not there yet.
Yeah. I started calling myself the Mindful PharmD probably in the past, 6 or 7 months or so. But as I reflect and I listen to you talk, I've really been mindful, practicing mindfulness for a very long time. And I called to mind as you were speaking specifically examples of when I was in college. I would be that guy who would sit, this is in pharmacy school, I would sit in the front of the class. My friend and I, we had, we were the ones that would host different study sessions,
Mhm.
and would invite other students to come in and learn with us, because we were the go-getters. Like, we were the ones that had the books, piled high, and we were like, okay, this page, this book, this page, this is what it says about, I don't know, statins. Let's go there, let's unpack that. And so we would have these intense study sessions. But in class, I would be the guy who most often knew the answer, but I would raise my hand and ask a question because I sensed that somebody else in the class wasn't quite there yet. Colleagues of mine who would ask questions in the study session because they were afraid to ask questions in class for fear of sounding dumb or feeling stupid. And so I took that burden, onto myself. And so I would be the guy in class, know the answer. I would sit up in the front of the classroom and I would raise my hand and I would ask this question that I know was on everybody's mind. Nobody wanted the answer, but I wanted to be that person who would give, like you said, give them permission to feel okay to ask a question. And afterwards, after class, people would come up to me and make, they would make fun of it. Like, man, you knew the answer to that question. Like, why are you asking obvious questions? Well, because it wasn't obvious to some of our colleagues.
Wow.
And so let's have the teacher dive a little bit deeper here, dig a little bit deeper here, because somebody's not getting it. You might have gotten it, I might have gotten it, but somebody hasn't gotten it. And so, as I think about my life, I've been doing what I'm practicing now, and what I'm, it's at the forefront of my mind now, but I've been doing it for a very long time, and just being mindful. And I like to ask, people, in my daily dealings, what is mindfulness to you? What does mindfulness look like to you? And so for you, Marina, what does that look like to you? I'm going to kind of ask you a question now.
I think it's being present.
Yes.
Being, trying to be aware, opening your awareness up to the present moment, and just sitting with that present moment, noticing how you're feeling in all your sensations, physically and mentally, using all your organoleptic senses, your 5 senses, and just really listening to your own self. You're the expert on the subject matter of your experience in life.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Dan Siegel, he brings in another dynamic, which is not only knowing yourself and being aware of, again, who you are and where you are, but he talks about this wheel of awareness. And the wheel of awareness, if you think of a wheel has spokes.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about how, those spokes represent your awareness. If you're at the center of the wheel, your awareness reaching out to connect with something or someone else in the environment. And so mindfulness it begins with self, but then there's also this element of extending outward and saying, how do I connect? How does self connect with this thing? How does self connect with that person? And when you're doing it right and bringing all, and not that there's a right or wrong way, but when you're mindful and aware of all of these elements of your existence, I mean, you could be mindful washing your dishes. You could be mindful just standing there at the sink, cleaning scum off of your favorite plate. But it's just intentionally, like you said, intentionally being aware of who you are and where you are and how yourself connects with these different aspects of your life. And what you do with that is then you empower yourself to understand how you feel in the moment, what you're feeling in the moment. Are you feeling anxious about what's going to happen tomorrow? Something that's totally out of your control, and when you realize I'm not even there yet, right? I'm here.
Yeah.
You can come back and hopefully relax and say, there's no reason for this, anxiety, since I'm talking about that. There's no reason for that because I'm not even there yet. I'm here, So it's a really powerful notion when you really reflect upon what mindfulness is.
Yeah. Sometimes the fear is worse than that thing you're afraid of. So it's like, whatever, the worst, worst comes to worst, that will happen, and just accepting that. So we are at the end of the podcast. I want to thank you
Oh, wow.
so much for coming on. We, you know, I'm out of time, but I'd love for you to share just a couple of things with us before we go.
Yeah.
You've already shared so many pearls of wisdom, so I'm not going to ask about that. I just want to know, what's your favorite food? What's your favorite hobby? And then how can people reach you?
Man, the easiest questions are, how can people reach me? They can reach me at the Mindful PharmD at gmail.com. The Mindful PharmD at gmail.com. I'm also on Instagram, as I said, at the Mindful PharmD. You can find me on LinkedIn, Matmon Harrell. Matmon is my first name. Sometimes people, when I say my first name on the phone, I think I said Matt, but it's Matmon, Matmon. And then my favorite food, I don't know if I have one. It used to be macaroni and cheese and baked beans, but that's changed. That's changed. I don't know if I have a favorite food. Honestly, I love food. And my favorite, you said my favorite hobby?
Yeah.
My favorite hobby is probably, honestly, reading a good book, nonfiction. Reading a good book on the mind. It's probably one of the most interesting aspects of our being, and we don't know anything about it. We know more about space than we do this thing called the mind. And so I love reading books about the mind. That's probably my favorite hobby.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on. I'll have the contact information, the show notes, and I will talk to you soon. Take care.
Thank you, Marina. Take care. Bye-bye.